Is it done? Welcome, welcome. I am so grateful to have today my guest, Farzad Nosrati, and he has written a beautiful book called One Divine Singularity. As an engineer and a truth seeker, Farzad has been very interested in science and in rectifying the discrepancy between science and religion. As a spiritual seeker, his story resonated with me, and I had the privilege of being connected with Farzad because of Ashkan Tabibnia, who is a very dear friend of Farzad. And so thank you, Ashkan, for connecting us and through 90210 Enterprise, and thank you, Farzad, for being our guest today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to get this started and to meet you and to talk about this.
Yes, and the reason that we are today joining is because today, this evening, starts the celebration of Purim, which is a Jewish holiday which celebrates Queen Esther. And Queen Esther is one of my heroes in the scriptures. I just love her courage and how close she was to God to receive divine inspiration about approaching the king when she knew that this could cost her her life. And she asked all the Jews to fast with her because she knew of the evil plot of Haman, who was the king's advisor and who the king trusted, but the king did not know of his evil plans. And so Queen Esther went to him and prepared a banquet and approached the king and let him know and revealed the plot of Haman, who was then destroyed, and all of the Jews were saved. And Ashkan was telling me how many countries were involved in Persia at that time. And I can't remember. Did he say 137? I can't remember, but it was a lot of countries, much more. He said it was much more destruction than Hitler had even had on the Jews currently. And so for her to be so influential in saving that many people, and for her cousin Mordecai, who had raised her, and to celebrate in this and to guide her and advise her so that she could have the courage. I remember he said, who knows, but for such a time that you have come forth at such a time as this. And that phrase, just resonated with me. So speaking of Purim, could you tell us a little bit, Farzad, about your feelings about this Jewish holiday?
You know, this is a very fascinating holiday. There is so much that is written about this, and there is so much that is special about this holiday, and I can go into a few of them. And there's a really interesting link between this holiday and the very major subject of my book as well. The one sort of a, since this is recorded, I just want to get a little correction. You've done your homework well, and you know, I'm very proud of you. You know quite a bit about the whole story. Just to keep that, Mordecai was Esther's uncle.
Okay, I've heard that he was a cousin and uncle. I wasn't sure which one.
And there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot of Talmudic. There's a lot of information that actually they were married. Esther and Mordecai were married. She was married to her uncle. So I'm not going to go into that. There is information. There's a lot of side information to the story. I was just actually reading up some information about the connection between Purim. Well, one of the things that's very special about Purim that's kind of to know about is, according to Judaism, at the time of Mashiach, or the coming of Messiah, right? The Jews have all these holidays. They, every other day, if you follow the Hebrew calendar, every other day there's a holiday here, there. Most of the holidays will get sort of canceled out at the time of the Mashiach or Messiah, except for Purim. Purim stays where it is. Now, one of the main discussions I've heard about this is going back to when Jews received the Torah, the Ten Commandments, they were sort of forced into it in some perspectives, by the heavens, by God. They were sort of directed in that direction and forced to accept the Torah or else, and so they accepted it, and they although they did accept it with their own will, their will was kind of pressured. Okay, so fast forward thousands of years to the time of Esther and Mordecai. During this period, when the order goes out by Ahasuerus he actually puts out a decree that all Jews should be eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
The reason this became such a special, dear thing to God, what Purim became so dear to God, is because you have all these Jews that are spread all over this 100 and somewhat countries of Persian Empire, right?
Yes.
And they could have easily hidden themselves and said, oh, I'm not Jewish. But that's not what they did. The Jews came out and identified themselves voluntarily as Jews, even though there was a decree that to annihilate them, because of the fact that they willingly accepted under even the danger of destruction. That's why Purim has become such a powerful story. It is a story of resilience. It's a story that I was just actually watching something. I don't know if you saw this clip, and I can send it to you after here. It's a beautiful clip about the connection between the Nazis and this fascination that Hitler had with Purim. He was fascinated by Purim. The reason he was fascinated the main reason, I'm going to, not going to go into details, but Hitler said on many occasions that the Jews are indestructible. And the Purim story is a story of how a nation that was supposed to not exist and be completely destroyed, was saved.
Yes.
That's what his solution, that was his final solution was about, is about finishing out the Purim story.
Oh my goodness. This is amazing, because this faith that the Jews had to align themselves with God, to declare that, yes, they were God's people and that they would be identified publicly, to be known, and at the risk of death. That takes incredible faith to do something like that. And you're right, the indomitable spirit of the Jewish people and the divine protection that they have received as a whole to not be destroyed is absolutely divine. It is just absolutely divine.
Right. So that's really, connecting it back to the Nazis and to Hitler, who thought, if I can destroy them, I can finish the story once and for all. When he read, if you just Google the connection, that there's a lot of, what the fascination that he had with Purim.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the years, again, Purim represents this story that time and time again throughout the history, with the Holocaust pogroms, even with October 7th,
Yes.
There is, unless the decree comes, God forbid, from up above, the people, at some point, I think most, especially religious people, have come to most religions. I'm not talking Jews in particular, but they've come to the realization that the Jews are something very odd, something kind of like And honestly, I as someone inside, from the inside, I can tell you, there's all these stories about you know, the Israeli army being so powerful and this. It's not. It really isn't. I mean, if you go there and you go inside the army bases and you compare those with the army bases in the United States, it's nothing compared to what they have here in the United States. There's this force behind it, the protective force behind it.
That reminds me of Elisha, and when his servant and they were going against this huge army, and he was so afraid, and he said, but we are so small and they are so big. And he said, Lord, open his eyes, in Second Kings, and he says, open his eyes that he may see. And he saw all the angels and chariots of fire surrounding him were from the other side that were helping. And I believe that. I believe that there, when you have an underdog like that that is going up against such huge power, which the house of Israel did again and again and again, and the Lord promised them, if you will be aligned with me, I will be with you. And that is something that we can all take into our lives as well.
And a great example. And to bring the subject closer to home, that's what my research, that's what my this is my sort of love story is all about. Is
Oh,
about if God, for example, is protecting someone, how is he doing it?
yes.
Is, how do you get from that spiritual realm of, let's say you pray for someone to get healthy. How does that happen, right? I mean, people. There's no such. I write this very clearly in this book, saying there is no such thing as magic. God just doesn't do magic. There is no magic. It's not enterprise. Where you just snap your finger and you're transported from one to the other and people get healthy, and it doesn't happen like that.
Mm-mm.
Things. There's always a process in play, and there's a system at play, and the book is about connecting the dots between how does spirituality affect physicality.
Yes,
How,
because there are divine laws at place.
yeah, how do you get from point A to point B? You know,
Right.
how do you get from following the commandments and laws, and regardless of what religion you practice, there is results. I mean, the results are clear. If there wasn't, listen, this is fascinating to me. Religion as a whole has been practiced and is being practiced by some of the most intelligent people in the world.
Yes.
We're not talking about people who never who are not learned, and as a whole, we're talking about doctors and lawyers. We're talking about intelligent, brilliant people in this world, and somehow they accept that there's this system at play. Okay, and the only way, when you're dealing with analytical people, brilliant people like yourself, I mean, it there must be a result. There must be a connection. It must be real. If it's not real, after 6 months, a year, 2 years, 2 generations, 6 generations, 17 generations, people will say, you know what, we did this all our lives, and look at us now.
Right.
Jews can say the story of Purim to say, look, we did as per our Torah, as per our laws, and we're still here, and we're thriving, and you go from all the Nobel Prize winners to everywhere. They're around, and Jews are around, and in a very clear way.
Absolutely.
There's a system at play.
And it's interesting too, when you have a personal experience where the longings of your heart and the prayers of your heart are answered, and that God is aware of you, and or you might say the divine source, or you might say the universe, or whatever words you use, but when you know that there is something greater than you that is at play, that there are miracles that are happening in your life, even the small miracles like the birth of a baby. When I held my first baby, I thought, how could anyone not think that there is a God, that there is something greater than us at play? Because I could not have created this on my own. It is so divine. And I think those moments when we feel connected to the divine are so nourishing to our soul that we cannot deny them. And many times people are seeking that and wanting that, and yet many times, like you being a scientist and being, a very intellectual person, sometimes they wonder, how do I make that transition? How can I connect with that? Because it just seems like there's a big bang theory that's going on out there, and we just happen to be. And tell us more about your process with your connection with spirituality.
Well, historically, going back to my childhood, I was born into a Jewish family back in Iran, the old Persian Empire that we're talking about now, what's left of it now. And there came a point, when I was around 14 years old, 13, 14 years old, where uh, it was right, a couple years before the revolution in Iran, with the Shah leaving. Under the Shah's regime, the Jews had, had very good protection, very, very relatively safe lives, and they felt safe. Uh, Tours within the couple years before the revolution, things started getting, you know, the anti-Semitism started showing up, anti-Shah regimes, it started showing up. So it came to a point where, it became very visible. And more, especially with Jews, they were sending their kids outside the country to go to colleges. Um, so that was the story with actually my brother before me, 2, 3 years before me, coming to America to go to college. And then when this whole thing started getting really messy in Iran, my father decided right there and then that he's gonna send me to America to live with my brother. And I, at 14 years old, I came to America. Um, I specifically remember one occasion right before coming to America where um, riding my bicycle in the streets, in places where I knew neighbors and so on. I've been there many times. And I would go with my bike to my friends or to buy something from a store or something, and in the same people I knew. Somebody, all of a sudden, somebody screamed, and I remember this very vividly because it stayed with me. Somebody, one of the kids, screamed out a Jewish anti-Jewish slang. So it's the Jew is coming, he's coming. So then like 4, 5, 6 kids started jumping on me and throwing me on the ground, started kicking me and taking my bike and breaking my bike and stuff like that. And then somebody came in and I think spread them around, and I went home crying. 13, 14 years old. So this was a neighborhood I lived in. I knew these people, but that was my own personal connection with this. And so restarted here in America a couple years later, revolution and all that stuff. My rest of my family came to America. More and more Jews immigrated outside of Iran, many to America, to Israel, to Europe, to other places. And back in Iran, I mean, I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, but I think we're kind of like getting too sidetracked in the historical part of it. But I eventually built up interest in religion. I went into engineering school. I picked up some skills, and I worked for an engineering company for a while, for Unisys Corporation, one of the largest computer manufacturers. And at the same time, when I just kind of building more and more interest with the fascination. I was always fascinated to see how things work. How do you get from point A to point B? That always bothered me. When When somebody said a prayer, it always bothered me. How? What? How do you get from a prayer to an action, to a physical action? By the way, I mentioned earlier about the discussion in general about the heavenly forces and God. I intentionally, and I put a lot of effort into avoiding even a single reference to God in this book. The word God does not appear in this book.
Mhm.
Instead, I kind of wanted to give people a whole fresh perspective and say, let's clean the slate. I don't care if you really, I do care, but whether you're religious, you're not, you're whatever religion you're from, or you're an atheist, or wherever you're coming from, let's start over again. And now let's talk about an entity that is the source of everything that exists.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this entity. How do you get from the divine singularity, the beginning of everything, to where we are now, and what happened in between? How do you get? What happened to all the forces that are at play?
Right. And this is such a beautiful subject, the way that you have unified everyone, no matter what you believe or what you don't believe. If you have a connection in some way to the divine, if you don't feel like you do, there is an entity. And to clean that slate so that we all have common ground right there. That's a beautiful thing, Farzad. And we need more of that unity. And so going back to Purim, because you're right, we don't have all day. And I would love to hear more. We'll have to have you on again to talk more about your book and about you. But I wanted to know, when did Purim become important to you? When was this holiday meaningful to you personally?
The more I learned, okay, so again, Purim's a story from Iran. The Shushan is actually a city in Iran, still there. I think it's called Shush now. Many people think it's Hamadan, which is a major city that many Persian Jews are from. But there is a difference between Hamadan and Shush. But anyway, the story is actually the story of the Persian Jews. This is a Persian Jewish story.
Yes.
And, so it was always a story back in Iran. Since it was a local story, for us. But it really I didn't personally find it fascinating until I learned more and more about it. And when I learned about my own history and the history of like I said, this resilient, why are we still around? Why am I still around? And why do I, and the fascinating thing is that something that most people don't know, most of and I write about this in this book, most of the Persians, Iranians who traveled, who were forced to immigrate out of Iran because of the anti-Semitism. Now we fast forward, decades later, and this force, whatever you want to call it, that was trying to destroy an anti-Semitic, forces in Iran that was trying to eliminate or any presence of the Jewish presence there. These people who have immigrated to America, to Europe, to Israel, you look around you, even in a city like Los Angeles, and there are so many very religious Persian, Iranian, Jewish organizations around, kosher restaurants, and they're full of so these same people. And back in Iran, I wasn't religious. I didn't know anything. I never had a bar mitzvah, until later. So understanding what a bar mitzvah was. Although my father, from his generation, my father was actually a cantor. So in a very Orthodox synagogue. So so there was a loose things that loosened up, and the Jewish identity was being destroyed. It was being, so the forces that was trying to destroy something that was almost going away by itself. Had they not done anything, I think had there's not been any anti-Semitic forces, I think the Jewish life in Iran would have diminished much faster. Let's put it to you this way. So now they're immigrated, they come here, they come to America, and the American Jewish community welcomed us. I must say, I mean, I have to say this because they wholeheartedly welcomed us. In Israel, the same thing. In Europe, and now you have this huge, very powerful, very steady, very happy, very got schools and families and so on. So I'm reflecting on the forces beyond and how they played out, and how does that, it's a story of Purim. It's a story of these forces that try to destroy us. In my own hometown in Iran, a few miles away from Shushan, where the story of Purim was, and now I'm here, and I'm writing a book about Torah and religion, and I was telling you earlier that actually I have a Sefer Torah, a book of Torah that I just had a sofer, which is the term for a person who writes a kosher Torah letter by letter, and very, very, very under very strict guidelines. And I'm sitting here, I just had this shipped to me from Israel, from the sofer, from the person who wrote it for our family, and it's not finished yet. We're going to be finishing it, but if you ever seen a real Sefer Torah, a real Torah scroll, and you've seen the letters and so on and so forth, it took about a year to write this.
Wow. Well, I love what a scholar you are and how you love to study the Torah. And you said something that really touched my heart when you said, why are the Jewish people still here? Why am I still here? And Purim is a story of resilience. It's a story of redemption, of being rescued, and this immigration of this forced exile, of the Jews, and escaping their destruction, coming to Europe and Israel and the United States, and flourishing in these places. It reminds me how, the Lord turns these evil things for our good when we rely on him, and for you to still be here and to have come full circle where you are sharing this story of the divine singularity, that we are all one, that we are all connected to the divine, and that there is a plan, that there is something bigger than all of us, is something that every one of us can celebrate. And even though we don't know we're celebrating Purim, we really are. And I love the principle of fasting and drawing near to God. And I do that regularly. And I am so grateful for the power that brings for our soul to commune with the divine. Thank you so much for being with us, Farzad. Is there any last thing that you would like to share about Purim before we close?
That Purim is a story of resilience, but it's also a story of hope. Yes. And the world right now is going through turmoil, and you have all these things going on, wars, and at the end of the day, this story teaches us that, if you really want to get the answers, if you really want to arrive at a sort of a peaceful world, we can't find it in anywhere else, but to actually look inside, get some input at least from the scriptures, and understand from that point on, to bring us, if you are connected to one place, in one source, wherever we're religious and so on, if you're all connected to one source, then that one source, that one singularity will bring us all together, and it will eliminate all this chaos that's going on.
Absolutely. If we all seek the light, if we all seek for love and for goodness, that will unite the world and that will overcome the divisiveness and the hate, which is what I think we all would love to have, sincerely, those who are of a healthy mindset. I appreciate so much your love for your fellow man, that you want to help others to connect with the divine and to understand and connect those dots from how do we get, I think that's one of the massive questions that we had. How do we get from A to B? How does this happen where I call out for help to the divine? And how do I get that answer? How do I get that help? And I am so grateful for the story of Queen Esther and Mordecai and Purim that gives me hope, and it strengthens my faith to know that if the Lord cared enough to answer the fasting and prayers of all the Jews through Esther and Mordecai and King Ahasuerus to reveal and destroy the evil Haman, that he will do the same thing in my life. And I know he is doing it in your life, Farzad. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your beautiful story.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ashkan, for bringing us together. And
Yes.
thank you to all who are listening. Thank you for being with us today, and happy Purim.
Happy Purim to everyone. Thank you.